For 19 years, I've stared at the ocean and seen nothing but a grave. My parents, David and Carol, vanished from the Oceanic Star in 1990, and the case was ruled a tragic accident. Then in 2009, a call came. A ship captain had found a single deck chair cushion, barnacled and torn, floating 500 miles from their route, and inside it, investigators found the note my father must have written in his final moments. If you've ever lost someone to the unknown, if you've ever had a question that sits in your heart for decades, maybe this story will resonate with you. Leave a comment below if you believe that the truth, no matter how deep it's buried, always finds a way to the surface. My name is Crystal, and telling you this even now in 2025, it feels like I'm talking about someone else's life. I'm 57 years old. I have a grown son, a life I've built, a home I love, but for almost 20 years, I was, in a way, frozen. I was stuck at 22. I have a picture. It's the last one ever taken of them. It sits on my mantelpiece. You might have seen one like it. It's the classic cruise photo. My parents, David and Carol, are sitting on those white plastic webbed lounge chairs. My mom, Carol, is wearing a big straw hat and that blue floral dress she loved, the one I told her was outdated. She's smiling at my dad. My dad, David, is leaning back, sunglasses on, bare feet crossed at the ankles, looking right at the camera. He's got that little smirk, the one that meant he was perfectly, completely content. Behind them is nothing but the flat, blue, endless line of the sea. A ship, tiny in the distance, is the only other thing in the frame. When I look at that photo, I try to feel the sun they felt. I try to hear the wind. But mostly, I just see the vastness that swallowed them. It was October 1990, their 25th wedding anniversary. I had just graduated from college and started my first job. They were so proud. My dad, an accountant who always dreamed of being a photographer, had his old Pentax camera around his neck. My mom, a librarian, had a bag full of paperbacks she'd never get to read. I drove them to the port. I remember hugging my mom. She smelled like Jean Naté and hairspray. I remember my dad clapping me on the shoulder, his hands strong. "We'll be back in 2 weeks, honey," he said, "and don't burn the house down." That was the last time I ever saw them. 5 days later, a call came. It was a man from the cruise line. His voice was sterile, practiced. "Ms. Evans, we regret to inform you there's been an incident. Your parents, David and Carol, were not present for the passenger head count this morning in Bermuda." "What do you mean, like not present, May?" I asked. "Did they miss the boat?" There was a pause. "Ma'am, their belongings are still in their cabin, their passports, their wallets. It appears they may have gone overboard during the night." Overboard? The word didn't make sense. It was a word from old pirate movies, not from a modern steel cruise ship with railings 4.5 feet high. I flew to Bermuda. I met with the ship's security and a local detective, a man named Kenneth. He was kind, but his eyes were tired. He'd seen this before. He walked me to their cabin. It was normal. My mom's nightgown was folded on the pillow. My dad's book was face down on the nightstand. On the small balcony, 2 chairs sat empty. Detective Kenneth pointed to the railing. "It's a long way down," he said quietly. The sea was calm, no storms. We find sometimes couples, or sometimes too much to drink. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "Not them. They wouldn't. They wouldn't. We found this on the deck near their cabin," he said, holding up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a single, expensive-looking suede loafer. My dad's. The narrative wrote itself. The cruise line, desperate to avoid a lawsuit, pushed the angle of a tragic accident. Maybe they were dancing on the balcony, had too much champagne. Or worse, the one the tabloids picked up, a suicide pact. My parents, who had just sent me a postcard from the first port saying, "Having the time of our lives, love you," had decided to end it all. The investigation lasted 48 hours. The official ruling, accidental death by drowning, case closed. I went home. I had to sell their house. I had to pack up their lives into cardboard boxes. Every object I touched was a memory. My mom's gardening gloves, my dad's box of camera lenses. I sat on the floor of their closet, breathing in the smell of them, and I just shattered. The first year was a blur of lawyers and grief. The cruise line gave me a settlement, a sum of money that felt like blood. I took it, not because I wanted it, but because I was 22 and alone and I didn't know what else to do. The years, they do pass. It's the strangest, cruelest thing. The world doesn't stop. I got married. I had a son. I named him David. When he was old enough, he'd point to the photo on the mantel. Who are they? That's your Grandma Carol and your Grandpa David. Where do they live? They live in heaven, sweetheart. They're in the sea. I tried to give him the gentle version, but for me, the sea was never gentle. It was a monster. I lived near the coast, but I never went in the water. I'd walk the beach, especially on their anniversary, and I'd just stare at the horizon, at that flat, endless line, and I'd scream at it. What did you do with them? 19 years, 19 anniversaries, 19 birthdays. My son was graduating high school. I was 41 years old. I had built a life on top of this giant gaping hole. The questions had scabbed over, but they had never, ever healed. Then in June of 2009, the phone rang. Am I speaking with Crystal Evans? This is she. Ma'am, my name is Detective Scott. I'm with the Coast Guard's Investigative Service Cold Case Division. I'm calling you about your parents, David and Carol Evans, from 1990. My hand went numb. The glass of water I was holding slipped and shattered on the kitchen floor. Yes, I whispered. Ma'am, this is going to sound very strange. 2 days ago, a cargo ship captain, a man named Joseph, was about 200 miles off the coast of the Carolinas. He spotted some debris, part of an old rusted shipping container that had broken apart. Snagged in the metal framework was a cushion, a deck chair cushion. A cushion? I said, confused. I don't understand. It's from the Oceanic Star, ma'am. It's one of their old Sunliner brand cushions. The logo is faded, but it's theirs. Captain Joseph is a bit of a maritime history buff. He recognized it. He pulled it on board. So, you found a piece of trash. My voice was cold. It felt like a cruel joke. We thought so too, Detective Scott said, his voice dropping. We sent it to the ME's office for analysis, just procedure. It's covered in barnacles, rotted, waterlogged. But when the examiner was handling it, they felt something inside the foam, a hard lump. I stopped breathing. They cut it open, Ms. Evans. Wedged deep inside the foam was a waterproof film canister. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs giving out. A film canister. My father. He was a photographer. He always carried film canisters. He kept aspirin in them, spare change. This one didn't have aspirin, Detective Scott said. It had a piece of paper, a note. It's damp, and the ink is smudged, but we believe it's from your father. We need you to come down and confirm the handwriting. I don't remember the drive. I just remember standing in a cold, sterile room at the forensics lab. The cushion was there in a giant steel tray. It was horrifying. It was green and black with decay and crusted with white barnacles. It smelled of salt and rot and 19 years of silence. And next to it, laid out on a sterile blue cloth, was a single small piece of paper, no bigger than a receipt. It had been dried. And on it, in my father's familiar, messy, all-caps scrawl, were 6 words. 6 words that tore the world apart all over again. It read, Carol argued. Evan, he pushed her, now me. 3B, tell Crystal. My knees buckled. A technician caught me. Evan, I whispered. He pushed her. 3B, tell Crystal. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a suicide. It was murder. And my father, in his last terrified moments, floating in the dark, clinging to this piece of trash, his only thought was to get the truth to me. The 19 years of scabbed-over grief ripped open, And what was underneath wasn't just sadness. It was a white-hot volcanic rage. The case wasn't cold, it was burning. The next few days were a blur. Detective Scott was a godsend. He was nothing like the tired, dismissive detective from 1990. He was energized. "This changes everything, Crystal," he said, handing me a coffee. "We now have a dying declaration. This is no longer an accident. This is a homicide investigation." The first, most obvious question: who is Evan? We started with the note. 3B. "That has to be a cabin number," Scott said. We sat in a dusty archive room, pulling the microfiche for the Oceanic Stars sailing on October 10th, 1990. My hands were shaking so much I could barely work the machine. We scrolled through the passenger manifest. My parents' names, David and Carol Evans, cabin 812. Then we searched for the name Evan, and there it was. Passenger Evan Carter, cabin 3B. I felt a jolt, like electricity. "That's him," I said. "Evan Carter." "Okay," Scott said, all business. "Let's find out who Evan Carter is." Running a name from 1990 wasn't easy, but Scott was good. After a day of digging, he had a file. Evan Carter. In 1990, he was 49. He traveled with his wife, Evangeline Carter. They were in cabin 3B. He was at the time a real estate investor based out of New York. Today, he's 68. He's retired, lives in a gated community in Boca Raton, Florida. "What's his record?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Clean," Scott said, and my stomach dropped. "Not so much as a speeding ticket. On paper, he's a model citizen." "He murdered them," I insisted. "My father's note—" "I believe you," Scott said, holding up a hand. "But Crystal, a DA is going to have questions. A 19-year-old note found in a cushion is dramatic, but it's not definitive proof. A good lawyer will call it a fabrication. They'll say your father was delirious, that he fell and hit his head. We need a motive." Carol argued. What did she argue about? Motive. I went home that night and pulled out the boxes, the ones I hadn't opened in 19 years, my parents' belongings. The smell of cedar and dust hit me. I tore through them. I found my mom's address book. No Evan or Evangeline Carter. I found her day planner for 1990. The week of the cruise was blocked out. Just one word: anniversary. I sat on the floor, frustrated. What would a librarian and an accountant be arguing about with a high-powered real estate investor? It made no sense. I started making calls. I called my mom's old library colleagues. I called my dad's old partners at the firm. No one had ever heard of an Evan Carter. I was hitting a wall. Then I remembered Pamela. Pamela was my mom's best friend. They'd known each other since college. After my parents vanished, Pamela had drifted. I think it was too painful for her. We hadn't spoken in years. I found her number in an old address book. I dialed, my fingers trembling. "Pamela?" There was a long silence. "Crystal?" My goodness. "Crystal. How are you, honey?" I told her. I told her everything. About the cushion. About the note. About Evan Carter. On the other end of the line, I heard a sharp intake of breath, then a sound I couldn't place. It was a sob. "Pamela?" I said. "Pamela, what is it?" "Oh, Crystal," she whispered, and her voice was thick with a guilt I didn't understand. I didn't think it was important. I told the detective, but he brushed it off." "Told him what?" "Evan," she said. "Your mom. She was so angry before that trip. Not at your dad, at an Evan. But Crystal, Evan wasn't just Evan. It was Evangeline. Evangeline Carter." I gripped the phone. "What? Who is she?" "They went to college together. Your mom and Evangeline. They were Rivals, I guess. Your mom always said Evangeline was ruthless, that she'd married for money. The husband was Evan Carter. Your mom hadn't seen her in 25 years. Then, about a month before the cruise, she ran into her at a fundraiser. My mind was racing. But what did that have to do with my dad? That's the part, honey, Pamela said, her voice dropping. Your dad, he'd invested. He gave a huge chunk of his retirement savings to some real estate group. He thought it was a sure thing, some land development deal, a silent partnership. And then, a week before the cruise, he found out the main partner had bought him out, dissolved the group, and paid him pennies on the dollar. He said the deal had gone bust. Let me guess, I said, my blood running cold. The main partner, Pamela whispered, was Evan Carter. Your dad was upset, but he was resigned. He said, easy come, easy go. But your mother, Carol, was furious. She was convinced they'd been cheated, and then she found out Evan and Evangeline were going to be on the same cruise. Oh my God, I whispered. She was going to confront him. She told me, Pamela cried, I'm going to get David's money back, Pam. I'm not letting that woman ruin our anniversary. I told her to let it go. I told her to just enjoy the trip. Oh, Crystal, I should have said more. You told this to Detective Kenneth in 1990? I tried. I mentioned the business deal, the argument. He looked at me and said, Ma'am, a business dispute is a long way from a double homicide. It's a family tragedy. Leave it be. So I did. I hung up the phone, my entire body shaking. We had it. We had the motive. Carol argued. She wasn't just arguing. She was threatening to expose Evan Carter. She was threatening to ruin him. I called Detective Scott. I've got it, I said. I've got the motive. I explained what Pamela told me. Scott was quiet for a moment. That's it, he said. That's what a DA needs. A 19-year-old note is a whisper. A 19-year-old financial motive. That's a shout. But Scott was cautious. A motive and a note still isn't a murder weapon, Crystal. A good lawyer will say they're sure they argued. So what? Lots of people argue. It doesn't mean my client killed them. We need something that physically ties Evan Carter to your parents, to that moment. What about the loafer? I asked. My dad's shoe. Found on the deck, he said. It could have come off at any time. We need more. More. I went back to the lab. I asked to see the evidence again, all of it. The note, the film canister, and the cushion. I stood over that tray. The smell hit me again, the rot and the sea. Can I touch it? I asked the tech. He gave me gloves. I ran my hands over the rough, decayed vinyl. I felt the hard, crusted barnacles. I thought about my father, floating in the pitch black, his hands, the same hands that taught me to ride a bike, gripping this very cushion. He was an accountant, methodical. He wouldn't just write the note. He'd leave a sign. I ran my fingers along the seams, the vinyl piping that edged the cushion, and my glove snagged on something. It wasn't a barnacle. It was metal. Wait, I said, my voice hoarse. There's something here, in the seam. The tech brought over a magnifying glass and a pair of tweezers. He worked at it carefully, digging into the rotted fabric and the crust of the sea. There was a small click as he pulled it free. He dropped it onto a clean white tray. It was small, tarnished black and green with oxidization, but the shape was unmistakable. It was a cufflink. Clean it, I whispered. Please. He took it to a solution, working at it gently with a swab, and as the 19 years of grime dissolved, 2 letters etched in an elegant script appeared. E.C. Evan Carter. He grabbed it, I said, tears streaming down my face. My dad, he fought back. He grabbed the cushion, and he grabbed this. He left us everything we needed. Detective Scott didn't hesitate. With the note, the motive, and the cufflink, He got the warrant. 2 days later, I was on a plane to Florida. Scott had advised against it. This can be unpredictable, Crystal. I've waited 19 years, I told him. I'm not waiting in the car. Evan Carter lived in a sprawling, beautiful pink stucco house on a golf course. It was perfect. It was a liar's house. We went with 2 local officers. Scott and I walked to the door. I felt strangely calm. The rage had burned down into something hard, something like steel. A woman opened the door. She was older, bird-like, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and too much jewelry. It was Evangeline Carter. She smiled, a brittle socialite smile. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am, we're here to see Mr. Evan Carter," Detective Scott said, showing his badge. The smile faltered. Is there a problem?" "We'd just like to ask him a few questions." "Evan!" she called, her voice suddenly shrill. "Evan, the police are here." A man appeared from the hallway. He was 68, but he looked 80. He was frail, walking with a cane, and a thin plastic tube ran from his nostrils to a small, whirring oxygen tank he pulled behind him. This was the monster. This frail, wheezing man. He looked at Scott. He looked at me. And his eyes showed nothing, just cold annoyance. "What is this?" he rasped. "Mr. Carter," Scott said, "we're here to talk about the Oceanic Star cruise, October 1990. Evangeline let out a tiny gasp. Evan's face, however, remained blank. "That was a long time ago. We had a lovely trip. I don't remember much about it." "You remember David and Carol Evans?" Scott asked. "Who? No, can't say I do." "We believe you do," Scott said. "Well, we know about the business deal. We know Carol Evans confronted you on that ship." Evans' lips tightened. "That's preposterous. If my wife and I were on that cruise, we were on vacation. We didn't confront anyone." My voice came out low and steady. "She knew you stole my father's money. My mother, Carol. She was going to expose you." Evan Carter turned his cold eyes on me. "I don't know who you are, and I don't know what you're talking about. Now get out of my house." "We found something," I said, stepping forward. Scott put a hand on my arm, but I shook him off. 19 years. We waited 19 years, and the ocean finally gave them back. "What is she rambling about?" Evan said to Scott. Scott reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 evidence bags. He held up the first, the small laminated note. "Your cabin was 3B, Mr. Carter. David Evans, in his last moments, wanted us to know that." Evan's eyes flickered to the note. I saw it. A tiny spark of fear. "And he left us this too," Scott said, holding up the second bag. The cufflink. Evan looked at it. His mask didn't crack. But Evangeline stared at the cufflink, and all the color drained from her face. She put a hand to her mouth. "It's a coincidence," Evan snapped, his voice rough. I've never seen that before." "Evan," Evangeline whispered. Her voice was trembling. "Evan, it's the set, the ones I gave you." "Be quiet, woman," Evan hissed. But it was too late. She was breaking. The 19-year-old dam was cracking. "He didn't mean to," she suddenly shrieked, looking at me, her eyes wide with terror. "He didn't mean to. It was an accident." "Evangeline, shut your mouth," Evan roared, raising his cane. "No," she sobbed, shrinking away from him. I can't keep it in, not after seeing her." She pointed at me. She looks just like her mother." And then it all came out. The whole ugly, pathetic story. It happened just as we thought. My mother, Carol, had confronted Evan on the deck. It was late after midnight. She was furious. She told him she knew he'd committed fraud, that she was going to report him to the SEC the moment they docked. He was ruined. Evan, drunk on brandy and arrogance, laughed at her. He told her she was just a little librarian, and she didn't know what she was talking about. She didn't back down. She slapped him. And Evan snapped. He shoved her. He didn't mean to kill her. He just wanted to shut her up. But he was 49, strong, and she was 50, and she hit the railing at just the wrong angle. She tumbled backward. a small cry lost in the wind, and vanished into the black water. Evan and Evangeline, who had been watching, stared in horror, and then my father appeared. He'd come looking for my mom. He'd heard the shout. He ran onto the balcony. Carol? Evan? What was that? He looked at Evan's face. He looked at the empty space where my mother had been, and he knew. You killed her, my father whispered. Evan, do something, Evangeline screamed. And Evan Carter, seeing his entire life about to end, made a choice. He wasn't just a fraud, he was a killer. He lunged at my father, my dad, my sweet, quiet accountant father, Vifan. He fought back. He wasn't a strong man, but he fought. He grabbed at Evan's shirt, ripping the cufflink. He tried to yell, but Evan was bigger, his hands on his throat. He pushed my father against the neighboring deck chair, the cushion falling to the floor. Evan shoved him hard toward the railing. My father grabbed the cushion as he fell, a final desperate act. He too went over the side. Evan and Evangeline stood there panting in the silence. They looked around. The deck was empty. No one had seen. They fixed the chairs. They walked back to cabin 3B. They packed their bags, and in the morning when the ship's alarm was raised, they, like all the other passengers, expressed their shock and sadness at the terrible tragedy. Evangeline confessed it all, right there in her perfect pink foyer, sobbing into her hands. Evan Carter just stood there, his face gray, the oxygen tank hissing. He didn't say another word. Detective Scott read him his rights. Evan Carter was arrested for the murders of David and Carol Evans. Given his health, the trial was fast-tracked. Evangeline, in exchange for her full testimony, was charged as an accessory after the fact and received 5 years probation. I sat in the front row of that courtroom every single day. I watched Evan Carter, shrunken and pathetic in his wheelchair, refuse to look at me. The note, the cufflink, the motive, and Evangeline's tearful confession. It took the jury 2 hours. Guilty. On 2 counts of second-degree murder, he was sentenced to 30 years to life. He died, as I'd been told, in the prison infirmary less than 2 years later. It's 2025. It's been 35 years since I hugged my parents goodbye. It's been 16 years since that cushion was found. Did the verdict bring them back? No. Did it heal that 19-year-old hole in my life? No, but it changed the shape of the hole. For 19 years, I was the daughter of a tragedy, an accident, a statistical anomaly. I was the daughter of a question mark. The truth gave me back my parents. It gave me back their dignity. They didn't fall. They didn't give up. My mother fought for her family, and my father, in the most terrifying moments of his life, in the middle of the dark, endless ocean, with his hands freezing and his body failing, he didn't just die. He thought. He fought. He took a piece of garbage, a floating cushion, and he turned it into a witness. He turned it into a message. He knew somehow that it would find me. I can look at that photograph on my mantle now. I see them smiling on the deck, and I don't see a grave anymore. I see a love story, a 25-year anniversary, and a final brave act of love for the daughter they left behind. The ocean wasn't their grave. It was just the messenger. And it finally delivered its note. What would you have done? If you had lived with a mystery for 19 years, would you have been able to let it rest, or would you have torn the world apart to find the truth? Subscribe if you believe that no matter how long it takes, every truth eventually surfaces.